Earlier, we actually talked about the importance of power and cooling within the case of a personal computer. And while those are certainly still very important, you also have to take in mind the bigger picture surrounding the unit, the environmentals, temperature outside, and power conditioning, and so forth. While these may seem like trivial matters, particularly in a small office, they can actually have a great impact. A number of years ago, there was a customer that I supported. I installed a telephony server for them. They didn't have any sort of power conditioning on it. It was a numerously expensive piece of equipment. Several years later, because of numerous power spikes, they end up having to pay for labor to reinstall the entire system from the ground up in terms of a software build. It cost them a lot of extra money. It didn't need to if they'd only had power conditioning. That's just one example of environmentals, but it should certainly serve as a warning that those of us who are in technical positions take seriously these impacts on the systems we support.
The first area that you're typically going to deal with is what's called HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. Heating, as you know, is the process of actually causing a temperature in a particular area to rise. For instance, if it's cold, you apply any one of a number of different heating technologies to actually raise the temperature. Ventilation actually has to do with moving the air around a particular area. And there are a variety of different ways to do this. There's certain factory types of technologies. But ventilation is important not only in the computer system itself, but also the area around it. And then we have air conditioning, which is actually the opposite of heat, in that instead of trying to add heat to the air to raise the temperature, you're trying to remove it to make it cooler. When you look at heating, ventilation, and air conditioning all together, this is what's collectively referred to as HVAC. And there are a variety of different environmental controls that you want to be able to use to correctly take care of the environment that your computer or computers are in. Data centers, for example. Heat's not going to usually be something that's applied. Instead, ventilation is going to try to draw the warm air away, and there are a variety of different types of systems that can take care of that. And then obviously some air conditioning in order to be able to lower the temperature within the data center that's created by the heated components. A lot of different details to be dealt with here, kind of beyond the topic. We just wanted to be able to introduce the basic discussion of HVAC. There are also certain recommendations in terms of temperature, humidity, and so forth that is optimal for electronic components, specifically computers, to function. To begin with, let's talk about temperature. When we discussed HVAC, you may want to raise or lower the temperature to keep it within the ideal. In this case, the ideal temperature is going to be between 68 to 76 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, not all the world uses the Fahrenheit system, so it's important to look at what it would be in Celsius. In this case, it would be 20 to 24 degrees Celsius, just in terms of temperature. Another aspect to deal with is humidity. And humidity typically should be between 20 and 60%. Now, that may not always be as comfortable for human beings, but it is more the ideal as far as environmentals for computing equipment. And then, of course, you have filtration systems. And filtration systems can actually use various types of filters and even UV light in order to be able to take different types of particles out of the air. The next environmental consideration to actually take into account has to do with power control. Now, this isn't referring to the different electrical dynamics that we talked about before, such as electrostatic discharge, but rather how electricity is conditioned or supplied. To introduce the whole subject of power conditioning, it's important to understand that you can have certain variations in power. It's not uncommon for power to come in at a different rate sometimes, creating spikes or surges. Understand that the words power spike and power surge oftentimes are used to refer to the exact same kind of thing. But one of the other issues that can actually come up with power conditioning is not when there's a high variability, but where power drops into a lower voltage type of situation. This can actually cause problems too, because for instance with hard disk drives, the motor can actually slow down, and then when power comes back, it can then instantly spin back up and actually cause damage to the drive. So there's things like that that can actually affect components as well. The bad part is to understand that surges or spikes in power delivery can actually damage or even destroy components. Because of that, power conditioning is necessary. Surge suppressors actually filter spikes. These types of devices that you see pictured here actually will filter out these variations in power that can actually cause problems. In addition to power conditioning, backup power is a good idea because outages can and do happen. In some areas, they're more frequent than others. Some windstorms may come up and actually cause outages in power lines. In homes, this may just be more annoying than anything else unless it's for an extended period of time. But if you're dealing with businesses and production environments, it can actually be a lot more of an impact. So as a result, there are some things that you can do to actually mitigate these types of problems. The first is a UPS or uninterruptible power supply. This actually takes AC input from wall power or data center or something else. It also filters power. But if the power ever goes out, it will actually supply power to some predetermined period of time to devices. Many times, it can be a fairly short window of opportunity, which just simply allows for proper shutdown of equipment. Some UPS arrays can actually go for a longer period of time. I've been in data centers and points of presence for service providers where they actually have very large and extensive uninterruptible power supplies. There's also generator backup. This is extremely popular in healthcare environments, but in addition, telephony service providers and other very critical types of facilities may have some sort of generator backup. If there's something that's very critical, for instance a data center, you may want to have generator backup just to be able to mitigate if something difficult happens in terms of a long-term electrical outage. The final aspect of environmental control practices that you and I need to discuss has to do with material safety. To begin with, you need to take seriously the whole matter of hazardous substances. There are a variety of different types of hazards that can exist in a workplace. If it's a manufacturing environment, there might be one set of potential issues. If you work in a textile environment, it can be another. If it's a healthcare environment, there can still be others. But typically, there are going to be warning signs for different potential problems that you need to take aware of, whether they're flammable gases, non-flammable gases, acids, and so forth. So just take seriously that there are some substances that could do you physical harm. Now, because these types of substances exist, there is something called Material Safety Data Sheets, or MSDSs. And these are essentially forms with data pertaining to the properties of particular substances. It's going to deal with treatment information. For instance, if you come in contact with a particular substance, or you're with someone that contacts that substance, what the treatment is going to need to be. It will also detail storage or spill procedures for that particular material. And then also deal with disposal procedures. And keep in mind that material safety data sheets are required documentation. It could also contain additionally toxicity, health effects, reactivity, and any potentially hazardous substance is going to need to have an MSDS. So just in summary, let's look at a couple of different terms. First, remember HVAC stands for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, and it's just a collective term referring to various environmental comfort and control systems. Remember, a surge suppressor is an electrical device designed to limit the impact of fluctuations in the rate of electrical power, which obviously can damage electrical components. That's what a surge suppressor prevents from happening. Next, you have UPS, which is not talking about United Parcel Service, but rather uninterruptible power supply. And this is an electrical device usually containing some type of batteries which supplies power to attached devices for some brief period of time. Remember, we also talked about generators, which is another form of essentially backup power. And then we have the MSDS, Material Safety Data Sheet, a set of required workplace documents advising potential impacts of hazardous substances and how to deal with contact, storage, and disposal.
In the matter of environmentals, as far as personal computers are concerned, prevention is always going to trump intervention. A little paranoia is a good thing. I myself am an optimist by nature and usually will just assume that everything will go well. But just a little bit of paranoia on my part can actually help me take the extra steps to avoid what could happen. It's actually a lot like insurance. You buy insurance hoping you never have to use it, but you're so glad you have it when something bad does happen. And overall, it ensures a smoother ride, so to speak, both from a data standpoint, a personal standpoint, and a business standpoint. Being able to mitigate these things before they ever become issues is the best way to handle potential problems.